Good evening. I'd like to convene our regular business meeting and ask our treasurer to call the roll.
President Baker.
Present.
Mr. Brown.
Here.
Vice President Cole.
Here.
Ms. Gibbs.
Here.
Ms. Hudson.
Here.
Mr. Peretti.
Here.
And Ms. Reyes.
Here.
You have a full house and a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. And at this time, I would like to, in honor of National Women's History Month, I would like to call on Michelle Van Dyke, who is the first female Director of Technology for Columbus City Schools, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Everyone, please be upstanding.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Van Dyke. And at this time, I just want to welcome everyone for being here. We do have a full agenda, so we're going to go ahead and get started quickly in hopes that we will avoid the snow that is supposed to start around 8 o'clock. So that's our focus. And let me briefly, though, read through the agenda so we all know the work we have before us. We do have a few public speakers this evening who will offer testimony to the board. And after we do that, we will hear from the superintendent, who has a special presentation of some guests who are with us tonight from France. We'll then hear from our treasurer and internal auditor. We will then take up a few board matters, after which we will contemplate our consent agenda. We will then have announcements from board members at the end of the meeting, then we will adjourn. So having said that, the chair will now accept a motion that we approve the agenda as presented.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. Mr. Treasurer?
Mr. Chair, I have an amendment.
I beg your pardon.
Propose.
Second.
Board Member Hudson?
Yes, I'd like to propose Resolution 10.3 as an addition to the agenda, and we'll pass it out and read it. This is an amendment so it starts out to discuss starting a new search process and a process. Whereas on or about September 5th, 2017, the Board of Education began a search process for a superintendent for the district. Whereas on or about November 8th, 2017, the board selected Hazard Young Atea and Associates to advise and assist the board with the search. Whereas HYA and the board talked with and considered many applicants and other potential candidates as part of the search. Whereas on advice of counsel and HYA regarding use of executive session under ORC Section 121.11 G1, the board worked with HYA during an executive session to narrow the list of candidates and other potential candidates to 7. Whereas on advice of counsel and HYA regarding use of executive session, while in executive session, the board identified another prospective candidate to meet with. And whereas the board met and talked with or interviewed 4 applicants and 4 prospective candidates for the open superintendent position. And whereas on advice of counsel and HYA regarding use of executive session under ORC Section 121.11, after meeting with each of the 8 candidates or prospective candidates, the board worked with HYA in executive session to further narrow the list to 5 and identified 2 of these prospective candidates as individuals the board would like to proceed with in a second interview. Those are our original finalists. Whereas due to withdrawal of the original finalists on February 12th, 2018, the board voted publicly to proceed with a second interview of 3 applicants, James, Stanford, and Bell. Then we'll call those the candidates. Whereas after completion of those interviews with the candidates in executive session on or about February 20, the board publicly acted in a regular meeting at Marion Franklin High School to proceed with 2 finalists, David James and John Stanford. Whereas on March 6, 2018, the board was informed by the State of Ohio Auditor of State that he was concerned about the process being used by the board for the search that may have violated the Ohio Public Meetings Law, ORC Section 121.22, and further, the state auditor stated that if the board had violated the Open Meetings Law, decisions made thereafter would be void ab initio. And whereas it would be in the best interest of this district and its students to terminate the current search and begin a new search process for superintendent, so that there are no questions that the board acted fully in compliance with the law and the spirit of the Ohio Sunshine Laws as to open meetings and public records. ORC 121.22. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Education for Columbus City Schools shall terminate its current search process. Whereas that the board will retain a non-voting mediator knowledgeable and skilled in both dispute resolution and Ohio Sunshine Laws to work with the board to conduct the new search, including scheduling, coordination of the process, executive search firm bidding and selection, candidate solicitation and selection, candidate interview, including public engagement and public reporting on his or her efforts with the board at the second meeting of each month. Whereas the board will retain independent legal counsel to advise the board with respect to all legal and compliance issues associated with the new search. Resolve that the board will retain an executive search firm to serve as consultant for the board for the new search, whereas the board will instruct the search firm that the mediator will serve as its point person of contact for the search firm for all services associated with the search. And resolve that the board will begin the new search no later than April 3rd and use its best efforts to conclude the new search no later than June 30th, 2018.
So we have a motion, and now is there a second, now that we actually know what the motion is? Moved and seconded. Okay, so we have an amendment offered to our agenda, and so we need to vote on whether or not we add item 10.3 to the agenda. And so, is there any discussion on this resolution that's been offered? Colleagues? Mr. Brown?
Yeah, I would simply offer strong support for the resolution, particularly now that we have even an additional letter from our state auditor making, certain, raising certain concerns about fiscal consequences to the Board of Education and to each of us. I think it's even more imperative that we act now, that we act quickly, and that we move on with a new search. I think it's what's been coming, and I think we need to get on with it as quickly as possible. The question is, do we move forward or do we move backward? And I vote for moving forward.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Any other colleagues have anything you'd like to share? Board Member Gibbs.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for the resolution. I am just now reading this, so it is a challenge for me to agree to add this. I think we should have conversation in the correct forum. However, I'm very hesitant to support adding anything that I'm just now seeing at the board table. And so welcome the discussion and welcome a full discussion and deliberation from all members, but it's tough for me to support something that I just seen 1 minute ago.
Thank you, Ms. Gibbs. Mr. Vice President.
I just had questions on the practicality of the April 3rd through June 30th date, particularly given the amount of time, again, we're giving ourselves, just from a calendar perspective, the time we're giving ourselves to really find the type of talent that we want. And we know the exhaustive process that we went through. I just have questions about the practicality of the date. I don't necessarily have any grievance with the mediative aspect of it, but I would like further deliberation on this, provided I just saw this 60 seconds ago as well.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Any other? Board Member Hudson, did I see your hand? Yes, ma'am.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I would just ask that we add it to the agenda so we could have some of that discussion, because it is about process, so we would appropriately have that discussion here at the board table.
Any other comments, colleagues? All right. Mr. Treasurer, would you call the roll as to whether or not we will add 10.3 to our agenda?
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Vice President Cole?
No.
Ms. Gibbs?
No.
Ms. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Peretti?
Yes.
Ms. Reyes?
No.
President Baker?
No?
That motion failed. President Baker?
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Any other comments before we adopt the agenda as presented? Okay. Did we already have a motion to do that?
To adopt the agenda? Yes. And
Yes.
then the amendment has now been defeated, and we're back to the original motion to adopt the agenda as it has been submitted.
And we did have a second to adopt the agenda?
Yes, sir, that was Ms. Reyes.
Very good. Hearing nothing else, Mr. Treasurer, please call the roll.
President Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Vice President Cole?
Yes.
Ms. Gibbs?
Yes.
Ms. Hudson?
Yes, although I object that we are not discussing the process.
Mr. Peretti?
Yes.
Ms. Reyes?
Yes.
That motion carried.
And if the minutes could reflect, I have the same objection.
Thank you very much. Let's move on to public comment. So we do have 2 speakers signed up this evening to address the board on non-agenda items, and each speaker will have 4 minutes. There should be a timer that you see on the board when you begin speaking, and as you approach the 4-minute time period, just please begin to wrap up. I'll call your name, I will state the topic and board action requested, at which point I will ask you to approach the podium and greet the board, and then you will commence with your 4 minutes. First speaker, Norman Jones. Topic, Quad Centennial and Centennial. Board action, acknowledge the Quad Centennial. Mr. Jones, good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to be here. My interest is the Quad Centenary, but I do have some cards that I would like for you to utilize if you need any questions further after we leave here. My name is Norman Jones. I am the founder of the Art of Living Incorporated, which is the owner of the African American Quad Centenary Cultural Exhibition, which is an act of law. Right now, the president signed a law in January to celebrate the 400 years of African Americans in this continent. I will be leading the charge in Columbus, Ohio, and in St. Petersburg, Florida, which I left too soon last week, to acknowledge the contributions of African Americans in this city. I am requesting the board will support and kind of give me suggestions and guidance to identify those people who they feel who have made some great strides to this country in the educational form. I am a product of the Columbus Board of Education, and I am grateful for that activity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Are there any, does that conclude your remarks?
I'm done, yes.
Thank you very much. Any clarifying questions from board members at this time? And we do have a way to follow up with you. Is that right? Okay.
Yes.
Mr.
So
Jones?
I just got, my niece just told me. I was going to ask about the trophy case at the East High School, but that was cleared up by the Principal Richardson, so that's not to be discussed tonight. Thank you.
Clarifying questions? Yes, Ms. Gibbs.
Thank you for coming, and I appreciate your comments. What is it that you would like to happen with the trophy case at East? And could you reiterate what is it that you would like to see
I
happen?
talked to Mr. Richardson, who's the principal at East High School, and he informed me that the trophies are in the school and that it is the school's responsibility to raise the money to get a trophy to put the trophies on display. So they cleared it up for me.
Okay, so there's trophies that we have that we don't have cases for?
At East High School, yes.
Well, y'all got so many trophies.
Well, when I went to East High School, you either went to East or you wanted to go to East. And I did go to East, and I'm very proud of that. And the trophy that we won for the state title in 1963 is not visible, and I was upset when I came home and saw that. But that's what I wanted to talk about in that area and that response. But thank you for that information.
And is that state title in football or basketball?
Basketball,
Basketball, 1963.
1963, yes.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. Mr. Brown, did you have a point?
I just really wanted to thank you also for being here. I enjoyed our little chat before we got started, and it's helpful to continue to be able to learn things from those in the community who have been here for a few years.
Thank you.
Maintaining a standard.
Good idea.
Clarifying questions from board members? Mr. Jones, thank you very much, and someone will be in touch with you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Bye now.
And our next speaker is Mr. Charles Tennant, and the topic of his remarks is Columbus Afrocentric Early College, Positive Things, Board Action. Listen about all the positive things happening at Columbus Afrocentric Early College.
Good afternoon to all of you.
Mr. President, members of the board, Dr. Sanford, Treasurer, and Ms. Rhonda Johnson. I am so pleased with all of the positive things that are going on over at the Afrocentric School. The pyramid is going up. I'm looking to get erected a marquee. I want to thank Mr. Alex Trevino and Ms. Clary for supporting me, being there with me to help these things go up. Last month, I received a plaque from the federal government, the Carter G. Woodson plaque. I talked to the kids over at the school about Carter G. Woodson, and they knew exactly who he was, and I was so pleased, yet somewhat displeased when I spoke with some adults about Carter G. Woodson, and they didn't know who he was. And I had to explain, and for those of you who are in here, Carter G. Woodson is the father of Black history. It came about in 1915, 50 years after slavery ended, and in 1976, 50 years later, it was proclaimed to be African American History Month. And I'm pleased with that. I'm pleased with the things that are going on at the school, but we need to really infuse this in everybody so that we can know the great positive things that African Americans did. And African American history didn't start in 1619. We can go back 2,000 years before that, and we can find some rich African history plus African American history beyond that. For example, in 1949, Mr. Cole, a movie came out, The Lone Ranger, and that movie was shown for a long time. But the real Lone Ranger was Bass Reeves, born a slave in Arkansas, escaped from slavery in Texas, couldn't read and write, but he escaped to Indian Territory and learned 5 languages, became a U.S. Marshal. And he did that for 32 years. And then I was talking to Mr. Cole a minute ago, Thomas Jennings. All of us go into dry cleaners and we see those presses where they're dry cleaning. Thomas Jennings was the first African American to get a patent on the dry cleaning business. And then his daughter was the first one who defied getting off of a streetcar in New York City in Brooklyn, and she won her case, and her attorney was Chester A. Arthur, who was the 21st president of the United States. And these are the things that we should do and get infused in children and adults so that we can see that America is made up of everybody and every culture. You have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Tennant. Are there any clarifying questions for Mr. Tennant, Mr. Vice President?
Thank you, Mr. Tennant, so much for coming here, Dr. Tennant. Are you concerned about curriculum at Afrocentric Early College that doesn't talk enough about African history or African history that predates 1619? Is there a concern about the curriculum that we're not dispensing or should be?
It is coming. And I see it coming, and Dr. Walker is doing a fantastic job over there getting it infused. But I want to see more because it should be a part. And when I talk to these kids in small groups, they eat up everything that I'm talking to them about. So I look for another year and a half for it to be totally infused in that curriculum, because these kids need to know from whence they came, and they need to know that their history started way before 1619 and slavery. They need to know this, and this is very crucial. I have an aphorism in the school on the wall which says, "Not knowing your history is like an acorn not understanding from whence it came." And when kids understand where they came from, you will see a lot of geniuses developing, not only at the Afrocentric School, but all over. So that is very crucial, Mr. Cole.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tennant.
Thank you.
Any other clarifying questions this evening from board members? I'm sorry, Ms. Gibbs.
No, I don't want to take anything away from Dr. Stanford's report, but thank you for your advocacy for Afrocentric and always speaking up on behalf of those students. I'm gonna try to hold it. I'm gonna just try to hold it, but I'm wearing purple and black for a reason. So thank you so much. But I'm gonna definitely let Dr. Stanford share his also very good news about the district. So thank you for everything you do.
You're quite welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Tennant. Good evening. Best regards to your wife as well. Yes, sir. All right, that does conclude our list of speakers for tonight's meeting. So let's move on then. It's time to hear from our superintendent, and I do believe he has some special guests here with us this evening. Mr. Superintendent?
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, we do have special guests that I will be introducing a little bit later in my remarks. To Mr. President and members of the Board of Education, often in life, there are times when you want to be subtle, but then there are times when you want to go big and make a statement. Tonight, I want to share with the board and our audience the bold efforts of our students, our staff, and our community partners to go big and to make a statement. Perhaps most notable was this board's recognition of Safer Together Day last week. It was truly a powerful moment in this district as thousands of our district's high school students joined in the National School Walkout last week to promote safety in all of our schools and demand changes aimed at curbing gun violence in all of our communities. These student-led rallies included impactful messages in honor of the 17 lives lost in the school shooting in Parkland, Florida, just only a month ago. At South High School, President Baker and I joined a couple of hundred students as they walked out and marched around the football stadium. Their rally included a powerful moment of silence and was followed by an in-depth lunchtime conversation in the cafeteria about gun violence in our community. At Walnut Ridge, drummers from the school's marching band, which I was very concerned about disrupting the neighborhood, but they did it anyway and led our students in a walkout in the community. Back inside the building, the names and the ages of the 17 victims of the Florida school shooting were read aloud. Then students at Walnut Ridge, one by one, signed the banner-sized pledge to be the one to end violence and commit to being safer together. At Whetstone High School, students led a silent walkout and marched to their stadium, carrying posters with the names of the 17 Florida victims. Students painted the school's Spirit Rock orange and added the hashtag #Enough. Then they tied orange ribbons on trees around the campus, all in solidarity with the national movement. At Northland High School, Board Member Cole joined students in their march with the chant, "Silence the violence, and enough is enough." Then, in the afternoon, Board Member Gibbs joined students at West High School as they walked out to the football stadium and formed a large 17 on the football field, again in honor of the 17 victims in Florida. At all of our high schools, our students, in their own individual ways and collective ways, shared their voices to this national movement, including those who chose not to participate in the marches. On social media, our hashtag #SaferTogether was trending all day in Central Ohio, and supportive community members shared the message in person and online. For students in our elementary and middle schools, Safer Together Day focused on the power and impact of relationships to keep our school community safer. At Champion Middle School, for example, on the day before Safer Together Day, students learn that making a difference in someone's life can be as simple as saying hello. The team from Sandy Hook Promise offered a very powerful lesson on ending student isolation by saying hello. As you know, Sandy Hook Promise is a national initiative launched by the family members of young elementary school students, and I'm going to say that again, young elementary school students killed in the 2012 Sandy Hook tragedy. These individuals have trained nearly 500,000 students across the state of Ohio on how to start with hello and how to empower our students to create more inclusive and connected communities based on relationships. The event at Champion Middle School was another great example of that empowerment and how powerful the word hello can be. Then, on Safer Together Day, 6th graders at Woodward Park at Walden focused on another Sandy Hook promise, and that promise is no one eats alone. Students at Woodward Park proactively sat at different tables to have lunch and conversations with other students that they would not normally talk to. At Georgian Heights Elementary, students came together to form a giant rainbow peace sign in their gym. And at the Gifted Academy, students stepped outside to form a giant heart. In the classrooms at other schools, students were encouraged to speak up anytime they see another student who is out of sorts, not being themselves, or that are chronically alone. On Safer Together Day, all of these examples were happening all across our district at every school in our district. They were going big and making a true statement that we are safer together when we work together to prioritize safety, when we act together to protect one another, and when we speak out together about the need to end gun violence. But the message of Safer Together is not a one and done big statement. We will have failed if that's the case. It has already continued to be big far beyond the single day. Tomorrow, during the statewide tornado drill in all of our buildings across the district, we will reinforce the importance of taking all of our safety drills seriously and the need for us to work together to keep everyone safe. Our principals, our staff members, and our students in every one of our buildings have to take these type of drills serious and to prepare for any particular tragedy that may occur. Looking ahead to spring break, which is right around the corner, our partners at the City of Columbus, thank you, Director Johnson, and the Recreation and Parks Department are working with us together on spring break programming aimed at keeping our young people engaged, active, and safe during their week out of school. There are already several free activities and discount admission opportunities posted online at www.columbus.gov/schools out, all one word, schools out, SCHOOLSOUT. And when we return from spring break, our Chief Academic Officer, Alicia Gillison, who originally brought together a group of students from each of our high schools to help plan our Safer Together Day last week. She will be bringing these bright young people back together to enlist their help in continuing the culture and climate conversations at each of their schools. We need them desperately to keep the Safer Together initiative a student-led movement and message, just as much as sending a greater safety message to our entire community. Again, thank you, Columbus City Schools Board of Education, for declaring March 14th Safer Together Day, and for encouraging our students and our staff members to go big and to make a statement about safety in our schools and our community. Let me briefly share a few other big statements made by our district. First, I was honored to join our students at East High School, who were all donned in the white coats of the Health Sciences Academy, as they celebrated a closing ceremony to mark the end of a week of school-wide reading of a special book. Students and staff at East High School read together the book, Black Man in a White Coat, A Doctor's Reflection on Race and Medicine. And I can tell you that the display of their work in the gymnasium was just absolutely spellbinding. Classroom discussions and projects focused on the disparities in healthcare, delivery, and outcomes. As you know, at the core of the Health Sciences Academy curriculum is a focus on encouraging our young people to do what young minds do best, and that is to ask the question, why? Why must I do it this way? Why can't I do it the way that I think it should be done? And so we encouraged our students that day to wear the white coats like a suit of armor, kind of like the Black Panther in the Black Panther movie, right? Hardened by three elements: an unwavering belief in yourself, a clear vision of the future you wanted to create for yourself, and a dedication to preparing yourself for whatever may come, all of which takes commitment to hard work. But I must say that the highlight that morning for me personally was to hear the story of Dr. Anderson. Dr. Anderson is a Columbus City Schools graduate with a very compelling personal story of the challenges that she overcame as a child and as a young adult to become a medical physician. She chose, after receiving her medical degree, to come back to Columbus. And she chose, once she was in Columbus, and we developed the Health Sciences Academy, to work with the students at East High School and in the East High School feeder pattern to show them that, yes, you can become a doctor. Yes, you can be successful in life if you work hard at it and if you dedicate yourself to it. Second, our girls' basketball team at Columbus Afrocentric Early College made another big statement last weekend. Our fantastic young girls at Afrocentric Early College made history by winning their 6th District 3 state title. And I believe that I was told on Saturday that they are one of only, I believe, 3 schools in the state of Ohio's history that have won 6 titles. And yes, I have no doubt that we will be celebrating that title. You thought I was going to say we're going to be celebrating another title, but we'll be celebrating this title with a special event in the very near future because they have earned it. And as the announcer from the Ohio High School Athletic Association said on Saturday, that these young ladies not only demonstrated their athletic skills on the court, but they have demonstrated their academic skills in the classroom with the cumulative high GPA that they possess as a team. And not to be outdone by the young ladies at Afrocentric Early College, our Afrocentric boys basketball team will be competing this week for their own Division III title. They will play in the state semifinal this Thursday at the Schottenstein Center. The tip-off for Thursday night's game is 8:30 p.m. Tickets are $10 and are on sale tomorrow evening from 5:30 to 7:30 at the ticket booth located at the Afrocentric Fieldhouse. So, wouldn't that be a very big statement if we are fortunate enough to have 2 state champions at one school? That would be very special indeed. For the third big statement, I would like to invite our Executive Director of Strategic Communications and his guest, who have come all the way from France to join him at the podium to tell us about the display you see before you. While they approach the podium, let me share that today we deployed the city's first automated short story kiosk, like you see before you. This is similar to an ATM that dispenses free short stories for both young readers and more experienced readers. We have partnered with Columbus Public Health to place one of these automated short story kiosks near the children's area of their immunization clinic. Health Commissioner Dr. Roberts and I were joined by the team from Short Edition to print out the first stories that will be available to children and families who are waiting for their appointments. Only 6 other cities across the United States have similar kiosks, and Columbus City Schools is the first school district, not only in the country, but in the world, that deploy these wonderful learning and recreational devices in our communities. And so with that, I will ask Mr. Varner to share more about this historic partnership and moment for Columbus City Schools.
Thank you, Dr. Stanford, President Baker, and members of the board. Thank you for your time tonight to welcome our partners from Short Edition. You know, we are a district of innovation when it comes to the promotion of reading. And a great example of that innovation are these short story kiosks. You've seen them before. We took a brief moment back in December, you might recall, to unveil them as soon as we got the boxes in, knowing that it would be later in the spring until we had a chance to actually deploy them. Columbus City Schools has 5 of these kiosks. They were given to the district at no charge by the Pizzuti Company as part of an agreement with the city and with the board. And so how do they work? With the push of a button, free short stories are printed out on rolls of paper, just like a receipt. And that's a long story. The goal here is to provide short story reading materials at places where there might not be anything to read, to promote literacy and good reading habits in young people and in adults, and to be a leading voice in reading advocacy across our community. So where will they go? Many of you will ask. Well, one kiosk was recently featured at the Home and Garden Show just a few weeks ago. Their theme was children's literature, so it was a great opportunity for us to test one of the machines out in the public, and it was a big hit. One of these kiosks will soon be placed at our newly renovated Central Enrollment Center once construction there is complete. And as you heard, the very first one was placed today at Columbus Public Health. And other locations are still being worked out, but the hope is to place them in locations where young people might not have access to reading materials, such as waiting rooms, government offices, or shopping areas. I am very appreciative that for this first deployment today, our partners at Short Edition came all the way from France to be with us. And so with that, please let me introduce Kristen Leroy and Loic Giroux to share more about the successful story that they are writing and that Columbus City Schools is now a part of.
Thank you, Mr. Varner. Mesdames, Messieurs, I digress. I'm sorry I don't have a French accent. I know you're disappointed, but you will get one. So, esteemed officers of the board members, thank you very much for having us. And on behalf of the founders of the company at the foot of the Alps in France, we thank you for having us and creating history not only in one of the largest school districts in America, but placing the first one in a hospital where there is great need to divert attention to other things. And if I may rebound on Dr. Stanford's lovely speech, we are here to connect your community in a very unplugged, poetic way. And that's what we aim to do, is to promote reading and writing. And I'll let my colleague Loic talk to you about this partnership that is very valuable to us. And we thank the moment that Mr. Varner discovered us on CBS TV. So Loic will give you a little more insight on what he's planning for the future of this partnership. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen, and thank you all for receiving us here. It's a real pleasure and a real honor to be here with you. I will try to make it short because this is what we do at Short Edition. What we also do is we try to promote literature and culture in places where you don't expect it. And working with Scott and with Columbus City School was a real opportunity for us towards this objective, because we installed the first one in a health center in the US. We have a few in France, and it's really a place where we think you need to have access to literature, to emotion, to think of something else. This is the first step of a very exciting partnership we are having here. We think the next steps will be to find other locations where you don't expect these kind of machines and this kind of literature, and then maybe in the future have some authors from Columbus writing some stories for Columbus, but also for all around the world, because we have 150 dispensers installed today. We are having more and more here in the US, but we also have some in Hong Kong, in Canada, in Australia. And our objective is to build a real community of writers and readers around the world, and Columbus will be a part of it, and we are very proud of this. Thank you all.
Have any questions at all? Comments?
Colleagues, are there any questions? Mr. Vice President?
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Comme vous voulez.
Merci pour le travail avec le district. Je suis très heureux au sujet de votre travail with us. Thank you very much. There are some of us who do speak French here at the table.
Excellent. Merci.
So thank you for this. This is actually outstanding. I've had the opportunity to play with it a little bit when it was actually upstairs on the second floor. So thank you for this work. We look forward to making great use of it throughout the city. Thank you for putting Columbus on the map.
And thank you for putting us on the map as well.
Absolutely.
So equally.
De rien.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Preddy?
And you may have mentioned this, will there be a point where we will have some of our students populating the stories in the future at some point?
Yeah, of course, this is what we started to do with some universities around the world, in Hong Kong, for example. It is a possibility. As a publisher, we are used to create some animations like this. We can work with you to bring out the best of Columbus students and have some others here. Yeah.
Just for another story, we're working with Penn State University right now, and they are having the first contest amongst their campuses statewide. And so the content is slowly coming in, and it's the first pilot that we're running. So eventually, we'd like all universities and schools to create their own content and be shared worldwide. So that is a goal. Excellent question.
Stanford?
I just want to add real quickly that we had that conversation at the Public Health Department. And we talked about it being maybe a little bit of a competition between the schools, kind of like we have the Poetry Slam. And they also offered to even look at our Poetry Slam products to see if that might be something that could be included as well. So they're very open to working with us and working with our students to be a part of this project as well. And that would be very exciting if we can, have our students featured in these kiosks as well.
Absolutely.
Stories or poems that are fiction, the editorial guidelines are fiction. So
Board Member Peretti, I'm sorry, Board Member Reyes?
Thank you. So I just wanted to add, just so you knew, we actually have students who have published books and poetry in the district. So I would say that in some instances, there may be no need for a competition. They've already put themselves out there and are professional and have found publishing rights and actually have hardbound books. So as you're exploring this, I actually would love to promote those kids who have already taken the initiative and are published authors within the district. We've got second graders, third graders, sixth graders, little babies all the way up to our high school. So just as an FYI, our kids are phenomenal, so I would love for that to become a reality. So as you're creating what a competition would look like, I would love for us to consider the ones who are already published.
We share that as well.
Board Member Hudson?
I think it's bonjour. That's about all I know. Thank you for being here. What will you be doing while you're here visiting?
Well, we're on our way to the Public Library Association Conference, annual conference in Philadelphia, weather permitting. Getting a bit nervous about getting there because we need to transport this from New York all the way to Philadelphia. So we expect a lot of attention from libraries statewide to promote the libraries within the city, to drive traffic into the libraries, promote the readings of the collections. It's a new medium as well to communicate all the goings-on that you're producing in your community.
Just a follow-up, President Baker. I'm not sure who to direct this to, but how will these be serviced? How will the register tape be refilled? How do we make sure folks get the stories?
So that will be through the Office of Communications that we'll be working. What's great about each of these devices, they are connected through a dashboard, so we can monitor which locations are getting the most buttons being pushed. We're producing the most stories. Which stories are getting pushed most? Are they the ones for young readers or for every reader? It will also let us know when the paper is low, and so we will have that opportunity to go out and change them. And we hope that becomes an issue. We hope that there is such excitement that we're running out of paper often.
Any other questions? Board Member Gibbs?
Bonjour. Merci d'être ici. C'est incroyable. Et je peux parler un petit peu, mais ce n'est pas très bien. Non, ce n'est pas très bien, mais je vous dis merci pour le don de la lecture, des imaginants et des grands rêves. Thank you so much for the gift of reading, imagination, and big dreams. Because where a car can take you is one destination, but where reading can take you is anywhere around the world. And you have given our not just our kids, but our community an opportunity to lise in places where you may or may not traditionally find something to read. I was in a hospital all day today, and what a beautiful place that would be to just take the time to read something different. So, merci.
I wish I just had a video and could film that. Thank you very much.
What I would just like to add is that from all our customers, so we have 150 around the world, Columbus City School was the one with the most focus on children and on literacy for children. We do have maybe one or two train stations in France that did specially designed dispensers like this one, but Columbus, we really felt this willing to bring literature to all and to all children, so we are really proud of this.
And who knows if the next best-selling short story author will come from Columbus.
Say great.
If there are no other questions, Mr. Brown.
Briefly, I too want to add my thanks. I'm not going to attempt to do it in French. That was long ago, far away, that I tried studying. But I do want to thank you and all of those that put this project together, including Pizzuti Companies, who really stepped up and helped make this happen for Columbus City Schools.
Thank you very much. And without further ado, maybe we should let you leave so you can hopefully get out of here before the snow hits. Thank you very much for your partnership. Thank you, Mr. Vernon. Yeah. Safe travels.
finally, tonight, we need to look ahead to the next school year. At the last meeting, this Board of Education officially adopted the traditional school year calendar for the 2018-2019 school year. Tonight, we are officially introducing the year-round calendar for our program at Woodcrest Elementary for the 2018-2019 school year. To do that, I would ask that our Chief Accountability Officer, Dr. Michelle Klein, please come to the podium to share with us a few remarks on the calendar.
Thank you, Interim Superintendent Dr. Stanford. I appreciate that. To President Baker, to Vice President Call, to the members of our Board of Education, our Interim Superintendent, our Treasurer Bohorik, Internal Auditor Smith, and our City Education Director Johnson. It's my privilege this evening to share with you the 2018-19 year-round school calendar for our only remaining year-round school of Woodcrest Elementary School. As you know, Ohio Revised Code 3313.48 specifies that we must have a minimum number of 910 hours for grades K through 6 and 1,001 hours for grades 7 through 12. Board Policy 8210 requires the Board of Education to direct this particular topic with regard to the number of hours in the school year length. The board will need to vote to reduce the total number of hours from the previous year due to the addition of the fourth records day per our collective bargaining agreement. The length of the elementary school day is 6.5 hours for our elementary schools and is traditionally 9 to 3:30 p.m. Here you will note the teacher, start, student start, and end dates for the year-round school, as well as their breaks. The next slide shares with you the professional development days, as well as the Wednesdays in September through March, except for January, that our teachers will have the opportunity of a lifetime to receive professional development for an hour-and-a-half continuous block through our curriculum team. The intersession dates are listed there for your convenience. And in closing, I'd just like to share with you the records days are noted on your colored calendar that you received, like this. We tried to make everything color coordinated to help you with a purple box, so those will be of great advantage to you. And lastly, Board of Education, we would hope that you will be able to approve the 2018-19 year-round calendar for Woodcrest Elementary School at your May 1st meeting. Are there any questions I could answer?
And thank you, Dr. Klein. And colleagues, for your reference, this is item 7.2 on your agenda. Are there any questions? We will vote on the calendar at a subsequent meeting, as Dr. Klein indicated. Thank you very much. Ms. Gibbs.
As it pertains to Woodcrest, will we have to come back annually to adopt their calendar?
That is right, ma'am.
And will it be included with our, will it always be separate, or will you include it with our regular school calendar?
It can be included with the regular school calendar. It just needs to be on a different page because it has a completely different format.
Okay. Thank you so
For
much.
like their grading periods and things like that, because we want to make sure that they always have their hours as well.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
If there are no other questions or comments for Dr. Klein, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Have a good night.
All right, well, I'm almost done. One quick reminder to the Board of Education that your next regular business meeting is currently scheduled for Wednesday, April the 4th, not Tuesday, April the 3rd, because our offices are closed that day for spring break. Central office staff will be back on Wednesday, April the 4th. And of course, students and teachers who will still be on spring break will return on Monday, April the 9th. With that, thank you, Mr. President and members of the Board of Education. That concludes my report this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Stanford. Are there any questions from board members for Dr. Stanford on his report? Board Member Gibbs.
No question, and thank you for those highlights and those comments. I just don't want it to be lost how proud we are of our own state champions. I know we talked about it, we've done a lot of great things, but our Afrocentric girls basketball team has tremendously impacted the sports world and academically, locally, and nationally, as they have an Olympic gold medalist on their team on this year. And as you work with a lot of different school districts, you see how they support their students. And I want them to know, as well as the boys who are still in quest of their title, that this district is fully behind them, all of the staff, the teachers, the parents, because basketball parents and AAU parents and track parents, y'all are a special breed. I mean, there's a special place in heaven for sitting in those gyms for hours and hours and hours, and you know, the time and the energy that they actually put into it. And wow, we have an amazing presentation about reading and understanding that education is our core business. I just don't want it to be lost that our students are excelling on the court as well, and that they are a nationally recognized team. So a big kudos to the academic team at Afrocentric, the principal, the coaches, Coach McKinney, and everyone. It wasn't but for a couple of years ago, they were not treating our students well. And when they travel to these different tournaments, they're not always well received. And so even when they won this year, there were not pleasant comments made about them as young African American women. But I'm glad they kept their head up high. So when they go low, they went higher, and they went all the way to the net and all the way to the tournament. So just really want to thank them and let them know how much we are proud of them and rooting on our boys team as well. I just want to say.
Absolutely. Thank you, Board Member Gibbs. Any other questions or comments for Dr. Stanford on his report? Board Member Hudson.
Oh, thank you, President Baker. Dr. Stanford, I was wondering if you could address the issues, the update on Northland High School. We received a lot of correspondence from Northland students, and I understand there were some meetings scheduled, but also just the operational follow-up. They raised a number of issues, and I don't want to just shrug it off to students will be students.
What we learned through our initial investigation that the letters and emails that the board received were part of a class project, and so the students, however, as you've said, are very passionate about the things that they shared with us. And on Safer Together Day, Mr. Baker and I spent some time at Northland on that afternoon, being able to reach out to some of those students and having conversation with them. Right now, I know Mr. Oldham and his team are looking into the operational related items that were mentioned in the emails and letters. And after his team does their initial investigation, then we will, have a response back to the board based on, the findings of the operations team. And I know Ms. Gillison also and her team, working with the building principal, have been in conversation, with the teacher and also with the students as well.
I certainly don't want to discourage any student communication or anything, but I thank you for looking into the issues.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Board Member Peretti.
Thank you, Mr. President. And then to that, sort of related to the same sort of theme, I just want us to, and I know we're keeping really busy with our 109 buildings. At some point, I think that we should, half our buildings are renovated, half we're looking into the future. We have a blueprint set out by the work that Ms. Gibbs and I put together with the district on the facilities master plan ad hoc committee. I think this is just one of those areas that we have to think about for the future, as we look at, renovating and rebuilding, what are those new norms now? Things like double doors getting into a building with a little atrium area and office and check-in areas, because I know not all buildings are the same. And, I got some contact from a few people in the community about a building with an open concept, and what can you do about that? It's an open building, and some buildings, just the way that they're designed, some things we can do and some things are going to be very tough to do. But I think it's just another one of those layers and filters that, as we look to the future of our facilities, that should be one of those filters that we use. So just
Thank you very much for sharing that. Board Member Gibbs.
Thank you, and thank you, Board Member Hudson, for addressing those letters. And for the viewing and listening audience, we received lots of letters from our students, from our community, very, very powerful, that this isn't an adult-led initiative. Students everywhere in our district and across the country are standing up and taking the initiative to demand change. And so our students asked us, a number of questions, cited concerns as a part of that class project, but I'm hoping that there's an opportunity where the entire board will have a chance to meet with the students at Northland and any student group in any of our district that would like to have audience with the board to speak with us directly about their concerns. That's why they're here. They are our core customer. And I was speaking to Board Member Brown about a resolution that was coming from the Ohio School Board Association. And just from the OSBA standpoint, we've been working and comparing the resolutions from Columbus, and we've looked at Cleveland and Cincinnati. But before the ink can get dry on ours, there's a shooting at Great Mills in Maryland this morning. And so probably more important than any paper of what we want to say, it is really coming down to what we're going to do. And it's coming down to what is the change that is going to be needed. Nothing that's going to sit in a blue resolution folder or is going to sit at the bottom of a pile. There is action that needs to be done, and very proud of the Parkland students for getting the laws changed in Florida. But one of the things for my colleagues that we're looking at are the number of other districts that have metal detectors. When we designed our school buildings, we didn't design buildings for shooters to come in or for this to even be a concept. That wasn't anywhere in our lives before a Columbine. But now, as Board Member Peretti says, as we look toward the future of what construction looks like, those are now considerations that not just us, but every school district, every office, every building now has to put into their building plan. So as we get there throughout our gradual and phased-in program, I'm looking at our Alex Trevino like, yeah, he's already on it. He already knows where we're instructing our builders and the people who's going to work with us to have safety, convenience, and learning in mind.
Thank you. Anything else? Mr. Brown?
I think Dr. Sanford may have something first.
If I may, Mr. President and members of the board, you're absolutely right. As a result of what happened on February the 14th, Mr. Oldham has already engaged in some of the work that Mr. Peretti and Ms. Gibbs have already alluded to. He's already been working with his team to revisit our open space schools that we have to see what changes we might need to make inside those buildings. He's also been researching some innovative practices and ideas that we might be able to use not only in some of these open space buildings, but also in all of our buildings across the district. And just recently, I came across a video that was aired on CBS News, and it was basically titled "The Safest School in America." And it basically showed some of the innovative things that a school in Indiana has done to retrofit their building to make it safe against active shooters that may be in the building. And so I'll send that video to the entire board so that you can see it as well as you begin to think about the future and what may need to be done, district-wide when it comes to improving the safety. To give you an example, the video showed that they installed a sort of smoke system, like a water system for fires, a water suppression system. And so with the push of a button, by either a teacher or by the administrative office, smoke comes out of the ceiling, and that smoke disorients the person in the hallway. And as the person continues to walk through the hallway, they trigger new smoke alarms that go off and prevents them and disorients them from carrying out with. So the school has all these different types of designs that they've installed in that particular school that you may want to take a look at and see for yourself.
And I don't want to miss the opportunity to thank the voters of Columbus, not this levy, but the one before it. You paid for and supported security upgrades in all of our buildings and cameras and, automatic where you have to buzz in. And we upgraded our buildings then. Now, we'll have to do much more moving forward, but thank the community for those security upgrades that we did retrofit our buildings with that provide the current level of security. It's hard to plan against people who are intent on doing wrong, but we are not without anything. So we do have safeguards as well as software and lobby guard that we introduced in some of our new buildings. We're able to retrofit, like at Linda McKinley, when you have to come through a secure door and we have people standing at doors. So thank you for continuing to look at that. Then I'm going to give it to Board Member Brown.
Mr. Brown.
Yes, thank you. And just a couple of things that, because we're talking about them now, I wanted to touch base on. I, too, applaud the student-led activities that took place and presenting just really good opportunities, in addition to what's been said, for students to learn about protest, to learn about speaking up, then their voices can be heard and can make a difference. That raising issues is important, just as the students from Northland, and I got over 50 of those letters, makes a difference. Civil disobedience, and coupled with that, the idea of consequences. And, there's been a lot written. I've done some writing recently on consequences that come with civil disobedience, and that's part of the equation. And it's provided for in our policies and is an important part of the lesson. So I'm pleased that we now have a robust discussion about how to act, how to make change, how to affect improving our community and our world that we live in. Those discussions have been interesting. I know that my own grandsons, 2 of the 3, 13 and 10, in their schools, and their mother is a school board member. And as you might guess, she has many of the same views about gun violence that I do. And despite all of that, they really worked through, they did some research on their own and thought about what they were going to do. They surprised us. Both of them stayed in class. They had very good thought out rationale for doing what they did. And, we commend them for doing that despite peer pressure, which was to go out. So I think it's really presented us some great opportunities. And the organizers nationally of all of this are really working hard to make sure that these are student voices and student-led. They have turned down money, they have turned down opportunities from folks that want to co-opt the message. And they want to stay authentic and keep those voices, their own. The See Something, Say Something message continues to be one of the most important. And with respect to the some of the ideas that have talked about with construction and with building security, I want to make sure that we don't go overboard, that we don't overreact to some of the ideas that are being floated about. Schools should not be armed encampments. I have serious doubts about the wisdom of metal detectors at schools. There are a lot of things that can be done and need to be done. And Dr. Stanford, you shared an article some weeks back that I thought was exceptionally well done, and I'll get back to it, about the steps that we can and should take. Some of it is just having the intelligence, and reporting things that we see or that are odd or that we question. And getting into that culture and habit is extremely important in avoiding some of these things rather than hardening our buildings. So I think we need to go at it smartly. And there's good information, there's good evidence for what works, and there's a lot of hype and a lot of talk about doing things that simply don't work, such as arming teachers. We want our teachers to teach. We want them working with their kids. That just doesn't make any sense, despite some of the people, or maybe that's proof, some of the people that are advocating that. And let's keep at it. Schools remain the safest places for our children. And that's what we want. There's nowhere safer for kids to be than in schools. Their chances of something happening are far greater when they step out. Far greater that they get into an automobile accident or they get into, we just have to look at risk assessment, which has become an increasingly important part of the mix, and take that into account. So thank you.
Mr. Brown. Any other comments or questions for the superintendent's report from board members this evening? All right, thank you very much. Let's move on then to something you said. Thank you, Dr. Stanford. Let's move on then, shall we? Internal Auditor Smith, have you anything to share with the board this evening?
Yes, I do. President Baker, Vice President Cole, and members of the Board of Education. The Institute of Internal Auditors Professional Standards 1100 require that internal audit activity must be independent and internal auditors must be objective in performing their work. The Chief Audit Executive must confirm to the Board at least annually the organizational independence of the internal audit activity. The Institute of Internal Auditors interprets organizational independence to be in effect when the Chief Audit Executive reports functionally to the Board as demonstrated by the following. The Board approves the Internal Audit Charter. The Board approves the risk-based internal audit work plan. The Board approves the internal audit budget and resource plan. The Board approves decisions regarding the appointment and removal of the Chief Audit Executive. The Board approves the evaluation and the salary of the Chief Audit Executive and other key functions of the internal audit activity. The Board of Education has approved all the above for your Office of Internal Audit and your Chief Audit Executive. In addition, all auditors have signed statements of independence regarding any audit areas they are assigned to. Also, at the beginning of each audit engagement, the auditors also review, once again, are they independent to the area that they are reviewing. So based on the above, I do confirm the organizational independence of the Columbus City Schools Office of Internal Audit. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Madam Internal Auditor. Are there questions for the Internal Auditor this evening from board members? Thank you very much. We appreciate that update. Mr. Treasurer, the floor is yours.
Thank you, President Baker, members of the board. This evening we have the monthly financial report review for the month of February, the 8th month of the fiscal year. This report was reviewed by the Finance and Appropriations Committee last Thursday. On a year-to-date basis, total revenues came in the month about $16 million under plan, and for the first time this fiscal year, total revenues have actually fallen slightly behind plan. You'll hear later that that actually will work itself out. It's just a timing issue. But on a year-to-date basis, it did end up this month about $3 million under plan, which is about 0.5%. On the total revenues of $635 million. Total expenditures, again, ran under plan a bit, bringing the year-to-date variance for expenditures to $15.5 million under plan, or about 3%. At this time in the fiscal year, as we approach the last 4 months or so, we begin to look at what will, how well can we see down to the end of June, and most importantly is what will be our remaining cash that will carry forward into the next fiscal year and beyond. As you might remember during our budget reduction conversations, one of the first things that we did during that conversation when examining the $224 million deficit that we face at the end of fiscal 22 was to take into account favorable variances in cash each year that we typically have, and we did that at the level of at least $15 million a year for the 4 years, and so we took $60 million essentially off the table. And so at this point we're running about $12.5 million ahead, and you'll see that that will more than likely exceed the $15 million, which is good news, because every dollar that we have in cash balance over what we have planned feeds into addressing that deficit. Certainly, cash is cash. You take it forward, you can spend it on other expenditures. It serves to, again, address that deficit, and any additional cash that we have certainly serves to lower our next millage request to some degree. So gains in cash are good things here. So we'll follow this. We'll see next month that we'll be in an even better position. But right now we're about 12.5 ahead, and we need to be at least 15 or better by the end of the year. Moving on to the revenue details, probably the biggest activity was in property taxes. We continue to receive advances against the first half tax settlement. This month, the actual revenue lagged the estimate by almost $17 million, and which took the previous $4 million favorable variance last month to about $12.5 million unfavorable. But we do know that because we've received our settlement that we'll actually be highly favorable next month, actually coming in about $32 million over plan. So at the end of the month, as you'll see in the next report, that will be about $19 million favorable, and that will likely remain so till the end of the year. I'll just call to mind, and I mentioned this to the committee, that after the second half settlement, which was in August, which was the first half of the current fiscal year, we were about $12.4 million favorable after that. So this settlement ended up adding about $7 million to that favorable variance. So that's all good news that it's coming in higher than what we planned. Looking at state revenue, it ran under plan for the month, bringing the year-to-date variance down to about $1.5 million over plan. When we look at the calculation from the state, the latest information says that we should receive just under $340 million. To be exact, the number is $339.9 million. We have in the plan $341.5 million, $341.5 million, and that's about $1.6 million less than planned, which is, again, within 0.5% of our plan. So we're on target there, albeit slightly under, but that will, that's what we're expecting to end the year. No activity in the next couple of lines, restricted federal grants and property tax allocation at this point in time. On the all other revenue, we had a fairly large monthly variance, and that was because the always difficult to predict the timing of Medicare reimbursement. It came in February. We had it in the plan for June, so we believe that this line will ultimately end up on target. It's just a timing again. So we had it coming in June. It came in February, and that was about $3.1 million in the Medicaid reimbursement. That was it for activity on the revenue side. As we go to expenditures, personnel again, ran about 1.2 million under plan, increased that variance to a favorable variance, and then expenditures under plan is favorable, to about 7.1 million, or 2% under plan. I reminded the committee that if we end up somewhere in the 1 to 2% under plan, we'll be somewhere in the $9 to $12 million range under plan. That too is good. It feeds into creating a favorable cash balance. We'll continue to watch that, but we do expect to be in that 1 to 2% under plan for the year. We'll look at purchase services, still running under plan, even though it ran slightly over plan this month. The variance is about 2.4 under plan. We looked at charter schools again. Reported this month that the data from the Ohio Department of Education for our second payment in February estimates that these deductions will be just over 182 million, whereas in our plan we had 191 million. So that could very well be a $9 million favorable variance there by the end of the year. The annual amount for ECOT, for those of you who want to keep track of ECOT, they started out at 8.8 million at the beginning of the year. Since they closed and they've amended those deductions, they've dropped 4.7 million to 4.1 million for the year. So that has ceased to be deducted and will be a significant contributor to this line, ending up under plan for the year. Supplies and materials ran over plan this month by just under 300,000. It brought the year-to-date variance to 1.8 million under plan. Again, one of the things the committee wants to do is to look into three of the top lines, general supplies, software materials, and supply and materials for operation and maintenance and plant, and see if there's anything in particular why they're running under plan thus far. They do seem to be highly encumbered, but we're just trying to figure out the expenditure pattern there. The other thing that we'll also look into is what's been our history with spending relative to the budget that we put into place. Do we have a kind of a pattern of underspending those budget amounts? And if so, do we want to factor that into either the forecast, or do we want to factor that into our yearly month-to-month plan? So we have a couple of different ways that we might want to address that, but that's certainly in the forefront of our minds as we move forward. Capital outlay was pretty much unchanged for the month at 1 million over plan. This will undoubtedly hit about the 3 million mark on a $2 million budget. Dollar-wise, well, it's a very large percentage, but dollar-wise, not that much in terms of impact overall, but the only line item that will probably run over for the year, and as I mentioned before, that had to do with some carryover purchases coming into this fiscal year. No activity in debt service and the other lines as well for the month. So in closing, while revenue is running slightly under plan and expenditures are further under plan, we're still building that cash balance, and I think we'll be in a very favorable cash position by year end. Next month, I've been asked to get the financial reports out to the committee as fast as we can so that they can review them and perhaps get a formal review of this report at the meeting, because our plate is full at that committee meeting scheduled. I believe it's April 12th, if I'm not mistaken. And at that meeting, we will be hearing about the fiscal 19 operating budget, the non-personnel operating budget, which is what we've been discussing here in terms of our recent budget reduction conversation. And after that discussion, then we'll roll right into the first review that the Finance Committee will perform on the update, the May update to the 5-year forecast. So I'm putting the forecast together. The rest of the management team under Mr. Gooding's leadership is preparing that budget and pulling all the line items together now that we've gone through the reductions and you've approved all those plans, or will approve the balance of them tonight. And we'll put that all together, and he'll roll that out in terms of a 1-year budget, and I'll roll it out in terms of how it impacts the overall 5-year forecast and that picture out into the future. So April will be a big month. I think that meeting will be a little bit longer than usual. I, quite frankly, intend to present the committee with some multiple scenarios with the forecast, not just one. I think we'll probably have a rather robust discussion about revenue projections, what we want to assume about state revenue. On the expenditure side, though, since we've had these conversations, you've all been involved now in what we're doing with personnel over this time period and what we're going to do with non-personnel. So that conversation has been had, but we'll still go through some presentations, I believe. But again, I think probably the most robust will be around those revenue projections. So I'll have some alternatives. If you recall, I called it my hurricane map. Nobody liked that name, but it stuck in my head. And I'll give some different pictures of the trajectory of revenues and expenditures and what that will do to our cash balance over 5 years, and see how we are really doing in terms of the best picture we can have as of April 12th. Because on April 13th, I can't guarantee anything. That concludes my report this evening on the monthly financial report for February, and I'll be glad to address any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Are there questions for the Treasurer, Mr. Vice President?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a quick question on the slide expenditures year to date. I just wanted to get an idea of what made our purchase services just a few $1 million more than what was planned. Is that something for the classroom? Is that something professional development oriented? What do you know what that increase, that slight increase constitutes?
That for the month, I do not have that here in particular, those line items. I just know it in the aggregate. So I'd have to get that data for you and let you know.
That would be outstanding. I thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions for the Treasurer, board members? Well, thank you very much, Mr. Treasurer. Does that conclude your report?
It does. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let's move into board matters, and I'm going to call on Policy Review Committee Chairman Brown, and I believe he wants to talk about first reading of policy updates.
Thank you. Presented for the board, we've got a number of recommended amendments to the policies and several recommended amendments to our bylaws. All of these, this is a first reading. We're not going to act on these tonight. The board receives routinely recommended policy updates throughout the year. And often those are the result of either legislative changes, state or federal, or regulatory changes. The proposed policy revisions are reviewed initially by our administrative team, and they look at them carefully. And then we have an outstanding policy review committee that has spent considerable time. In fact, we met 2 weeks in a row, most recently. And hardworking group. And they really take a good, hard look and ask good questions, and it's a great committee to be part of. And as a result of all of that, we have some recommendations here. We are nearly entirely caught up with the Neola changes that have been brought to us over the last couple years, and that will free us up to focus on perhaps some more interesting things. But nearly everything that's here tonight for first review is a change that is just to comply with law changes that have taken place. There are the first three on your, and if you look to the synopsis, that's really the handiest tool. The first three are bylaw amendments, and they're separated out because in order for us to make the changes to bylaws requires a supermajority. We have to have 6 of 7 votes to make those changes. There's nothing there that is extraordinary or substantive, but the committee spent some time in coming up with some definitions to help these read more clearly, and some of the technology wording brought up to date was fairly old. And also to reinforce, because of a decision that was made by the Ohio Supreme Court a few years ago in a case called White the White versus King, the court made it clear, and policies or the bylaws are making it clear, that text messages and emails and all kinds of communications electronically also come within the ambit of Ohio sunshine laws. So with that, these are here, as I say, for first reading. This will conclude the first reading, and if you've got questions, I'm happy to take them tonight or at any time between now and when we get to our second reading of these.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are there any questions for Chairman Brown? Board Member Reyes?
Board Member Brown, so you would like us to send you questions via email? We have several. Probably be easier.
Emails, sure, that's great.
Okay.
And I.
Just clarification.
Yeah, sure. And I like that better than text.
It's too much for text. Mr.
Too much
Brown.
for text.
But thank you for saying that.
Questions or comments on this first reading? This is a first reading, so you do have ample opportunity to weigh in and talk with Mr. Brown on these items. Yes, Board Member Gibbs?
Yes, can you speak to the College Credit Plus policy review? And
This one is fairly simple. The policy is 2271, and it's a replacement of what's there simply to reflect the latest amendments in law. House Bill 49 passed, which was the biennial appropriations bill, and it contained some amendments that affect the post-secondary enrollment option, so the changes made simply conform our policy to the law.
okay, thank you for that. But the College Credit Plus, if you are enrolled in it and you are no longer enrolled in the district, if you become expelled, then that ends the College Credit Plus for you, and that's what this policy is saying. So if you are no longer a student in the district, is the way I'm reading this, then that privilege, which is an extra privilege, that also ends as well. So that's what this policy is saying.
I don't have the policy itself in front of me
It's right
at
here.
the moment.
It's in the,
Why?
it's policy.
Yes,
So did you just discuss this in committee?
yes, at length.
So I guess other than it being so we're going to comply with it by law, how is it going to impact our students? How will this new law impact our students that are enrolled in College Credit Plus?
It's a good question, and that's something that I will need to get back to you, except I'm guessing that our professional educators know.
Let's ask Dr. Stanford to weigh in on this.
Just real briefly, Mr. President, Ms. Gibbs, the change that you're speaking of specifically about right now was a change that state legislators made because we had situations around the state where students had been expelled from their school district, but they were still taking courses at the universities, right? And so, you know, if you've done something severe enough to be expelled from the school district, you shouldn't still be able to take those classes at the universities. And so this is basically saying when a student is expelled, and the changes in state law basically have said that when a student is expelled, then the superintendent has to send a letter to the university to let them know that that student has been expelled from the high school or from the school district.
Thank you so much.
Any other questions for Mr. Brown?
And if I may, Mr. President,
Dr. Stanford?
to the board members, there are, as Mr. Brown has already stated, there have been a number of changes, you know, to the college credit program as a result of the biennial budget that was passed. And so this is just, you know, reconciling those changes and making sure that they are consistent with each other and that we are carrying out the responsibilities and duties that we have as a school district as a part of what is in state law. And Cherie Wells and our team and Tanya McClanahan are on top of all of those changes, and they are fully aware of those changes and are ready to make sure that we are, and they have already, because the budget bill passed last summer, and so those changes have already been put into effect, and they've been carrying out those changes since they became effective in law. Yeah.
Thank you for that, because it appears in two of these updates, one just about the clarification around that, and in the next piece on the Ohio High School Athletic Association, as a part of their being able to participate, it also states that no student will be denied the opportunity to participate in interscholastic athletics because they're participating in the College Credit Plus program. And so as long as they fulfill their academic, non-academic, and financial requirements, they can participate in sports. And sometimes we have students, because they're super achievers, they may be taking a full course load off campus, but that they can still play for their home teams. And so I'm glad that this language is clarifying that that is permissible and that those students are able to take advantage of those opportunities. Those are my two questions around College Credit Plus.
Thank you, Ms. Gibbs. Mr. Vice President?
No, I just wanted to add, too, that this policy piece takes a proactive measure that allows us to look at things like technology that's constantly upgrading and changing over time, for us to provide and extend broader definition so that we include and capture that in the policy language as well. So I applaud the committee on that. One of the sad points for me, though, is in the weapons section particularly, that because Senate Bill 199 changed the law to allow carry concealed within a vehicle to even be in the parking lot of a school district. And so when we're talking about public safety, when we're talking about the safety of our children and our staff, for me, this is just another one of these instances where we need to take this argument to the State House for amendment to this act, because this is something that, in my mind, again, opens the door and creates a pathway for recklessness with a misuse of with the potential of a misuse of a weapon. So I'm not happy about this, but it is omnibus compliance with the law.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the committee. Thank you, Mr. Brown, for continuing to chair this committee. And we will look forward to seeing these two omnibus amendments at a subsequent board meeting, and we will vote on them then. So please do feel free to work with Mr. Brown if you have any thoughts or concerns. And having said that, let's move on then. And is there a motion that we adopt the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Moved and seconded?
Second.
All right. You can choose who did which.
So moved.
Are there questions or comments on any piece of legislation contained within the consent agenda this evening, colleagues? Mr. Preddy.
So I just want to point out that, unfortunately, we are still going through our budget processes. And with that, we saw personnel reductions. It's my phone. I know it is. I'm so sorry. I know we did our personnel reductions at our last board meeting, and you'll see in our consent agenda there are a number of further reductions to our administrative personnel for Columbus City Schools. And I guess, so my question is related to that. As we continue to look forward, unfortunately we are, making these changes due to the state budget, due to the fact that we are constantly underfunded by the state. How are we on that task force for looking at our buildings? I know we started that process, passed the resolution. What sort of time frame are we looking at for that so we can start to move on that?
Mr. President, to Mr. Peretti, we're very close. I've already spoken to several individuals, and they are definitely willing to participate. I explained to all of them that I've spoken to thus far that this offer of participation is subject to the board's approval. And I gave them a copy of the board's resolution and also of policy 7105, sharing with them that the foundation of this work is going to be based on that policy. and that in addition to school buildings, that we are also going to review and assess our administrative portfolio of buildings as well. And so the individuals are excited. There are roughly, I believe, 18 or 19 individuals that I have reached out to. I'm still waiting to hear back from a couple of them, but the majority of them have already said yes, that they are willing to be considered for this opportunity. And so my hope is that I will be able to have this before the board at the next meeting. And we are tentatively planning to have our first meeting on April the 12th. But again, you know, that's tentative based on this continuing back and forth dialogue with the last few individuals that are still, you know, considering the opportunity.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the update.
Any other questions or comments on the consent agenda, colleagues? Seeing none, Mr. Treasurer, please call the roll.
Vice President Cole?
Yes.
Ms. Gibbs?
Yes.
Ms. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Peretti?
Yes.
Ms. Reyes?
Yes.
President Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
That motion carried.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Thank you, colleagues. Announcements. Board members, have you any brief points of pride or other announcements you might like to share? Mr. Brown?
Just very briefly, because we have talked on the issue already enough, but the same national student organizers who have been behind the walkout and more have a march scheduled for this Saturday, the 24th, and it's at 10 o'clock, and it's going to begin, location changed, but I believe it's going to begin at West Park, just south of COSI, and then we'll march to the State House, have some student speeches, and then back. And they too have been doing a good job that it's not politicians and it's not going to be the usual suspects speaking. It's going to be students.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. And I think we have a picture. I think we'll come back to that picture. Or is it at the end? So I just wanted to share quickly before I go to board members Hudson and Reyes. There was a special event this morning, which we may have a picture of. While we're working on that, oh, there it is. Okay. So this morning, there's an organization, the National Auto Body Council, who partnered with State Farm Insurance, Volunteers of America, Veterans and Families First, and others, including our students at Fort Hays in Collision Tech and Repair. They presented this car to a veteran this morning. Car was donated by State Farm, and it was worked on by our students at Fort Hays. And they do this at least once a year. The last time was June 1st, 2017. So this is an example of our students engaging with the community, doing something really great for someone who has served our country and who needs a hand up. And so I couldn't be more proud of those students, and they do this every year. And if you haven't been out there to Fort Hays recently to visit, they're just amazing kids out there doing great things, and great students as well as administrators and teachers. So just wanted to give them a round of applause. Now, Board Member Reyes.
So, thank you, Mr. President. Just to keep on the veteran theme, I just wanted to kind of reiterate the board resolution that we just adopted to grant diplomas for veterans of World War II and Korean conflict and the Vietnam conflict. So those of you who are here and can read the agenda, or for our viewing and listening audience, just highlighting that we have the pleasure of doing that for our veterans who left high school in order to fight for their country. And then we wish to recognize their efforts by awarding them a high school diploma. And in this instance, we are bestowing a diploma upon Albert Cates in accordance with our statute. So I just wanted to kind of highlight that. And I think in the past, we've had the opportunity, I know I've had the opportunity to actually hand a diploma to our veteran. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to do that again this year during our commencement. So I just wanted to highlight that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Board Member Hudson? Oh, very well then. Anyone else? Board Member, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Vice President, I forgot.
Thank you. I'll be brief. Definitely acknowledging our student walkout. It was a wonderful event that was put together by Mr. Johnson over at Northland and Radio One. Definitely want to acknowledge them. Had the opportunity to really share my thoughts with the kids about their movement building to change culture and climate in that school. And I'm hoping that that is a continuing momentum that happens throughout the district. So I was excited about that. I even had the opportunity to rap to the students too. And I do have those skills. In addition, I wanted to shout out Ms. Danita Turner, who is our principal at Southwood Elementary. I had the opportunity to visit our Super Readers program there and sit with our students and just spend some time with them and walk through what is a beautiful, beautiful building there with wonderful staff who are doing committed work to our students to ensure they strengthen their literacy. So I thank you for that as well. Wonderful time.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Board Member Gibbs, did you have your hand up?
I do. You can't say points of pride and not have tons to say. So first, to all of the young people who participated, whether they were on the news or not, the elementary students, the balloon launches, the teachers who read, the kids that stood up, and those who stood up to say that they didn't want to. I'm just very proud and heard tons of positive feedback from people in the community, how proud they were, Dr. Stanford, of how we handled our student activism. There were districts that suspended kids. There were districts that marked them unexcused. There were school districts that pulled the fire alarm and had a lockdown just so that the students would not be able to walk out and participate at 10 o'clock. And so very proud of our leadership and people who thought better of our students to give them the opportunity and to not be a barrier. Very proud Columbus City School moment. Just a couple of announcements. The Innovation and Reform Committee meeting will meet on Tuesday, April 10th. We had an amazing kickoff meeting for the year in our very own Cherie Wells. Had a chance to visit the Nashville Academies and do the study visit. You will hear a lot more about the Nashville Academies and what we have learned from them, and to look at, as we're talking about what the new buildings look like, we are talking about what goes in them. And so those next generation cutting edge academic programs and offerings that will continue to make us the district of choice. We're looking forward to see where that work leads and what other ideas we can glean from Nashville, Pittsburgh, and many other places. Secondly, the Wedgwood community is having a Wedgwood multicultural event this Saturday, March 24th from 1 to 5. If you happen to be out there, they want you to come and participate. Colleagues, I will send you the email so that you will know, and I'm sure they've shared it with the district. Wedgwood is on the west side of Columbus, and they are one of the most diverse cultural communities in the city. Probably about 10 to 15 languages spoken in a matter of a few blocks, and they're doing a lot to help their students connect and be a part of the community. So if you are there, then we want you to attend that. And finally, it is time for Delta Sigma Theta to sponsor the Shirley Chisholm Conference for Girls in Government. And this year's theme is Defending Our Freedom, honoring women in the military and law enforcement. So you will see an application coming out for girls in grades 6 through 10 who would like to explore careers in the military, the police department, law enforcement, and/or safety. That conference is free of charge, and it is open to all young women in the district and without. And so those are just amazing opportunities. And I want to thank all of our community partners who work with kids who hosted events even this weekend, like Project Alpha and the Healthy House that was at St. Stephen's to help our community. We have a lot of people that work with us, and they are all in to help our kids, their parents, and the families achieve and maintain family stability. And so we thank each and every person, Clintonville Resource Center to Southside Settlement, I mean, everybody, whoever has their hand all in, we really appreciate the work. That's all I have, Mr. President.
Thank you, Ms. Gibbs. And Mr. Brown, I think you had one more?
Yeah, this one's an early heads up on event that is going to take place in April. Our good friends at Shadowbox Live contacted us, and Marilyn and I have already scheduled, we're going to be going, but STEM Rocks the Box 2018. And they're looking for students. They're going to be auditioning students, including ours, communicated with Betty Hill and made sure she's aware of this, and she was already on top of it, working with Stacy Board from Shadowbox. And hopefully we will have some of our Columbus City School students participating either backstage or on stage, or there's all kinds of work, and putting on the performance that will be on April 23, I believe, or actually, they'll get started April 16th, so watch for it.
Very good, thank you. Ms. Gibbs, one more.
Yeah, just one more, and I'm not going to ask if we're going to get a snow day tomorrow, but a lot of people are thinking it. But I want to know if someone can speak to the initiative that is going forward to hire our summer students to work at the zoo. Is that something that's moving forward, and can we talk about that opportunity that's coming up?
Thank you for that question. President Baker, Board Member Gibbs, to your question, we are in the initial conversations with the Columbus Zoo and the recruiting process. And so what we're trying to set up now is to settle on a date where the zoo will come out and do an orientation, help students complete the applications. Then we'll actually take the students out to the zoo to see the different jobs that they could be working this summer. So we're still in the initial phases, but it is coming along pretty well.
I caught wind that they need about a couple hundred kids to work at the zoo this summer.
That is absolutely correct.
Okay. If you are interested in working at the zoo this summer, and if I'm right, there's a CODA bus that goes from downtown to the zoo, so there's transportation. If a young person wants to pursue that, if you're a future biologist, veterinarian, student that's interested in getting paid this summer, who should they contact?
Once we get all of the particulars down, we're going to send that information out to every school so that every child has that information. We'll even do voice dialers so that parents are aware of the information. So if Johnny just wants to hang out this summer, letting mom or dad know that he has an opportunity to make some money at the zoo and get some experience.
Okay. Pay attention to the guidance counselor, because that opportunity is coming.
Yes.
Thank you.
Anything else for the good of the cause this evening, colleagues? If not, the chair will entertain a motion that we adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Treasurer.
Ms. Gibbs?
Yes.
Ms. Hudson? Ms. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Peretti? Yes. Ms. Reyes? President Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Vice President Cole?
Yes.
That motion carried.
Thank you. We stand adjourned. Have a good evening. Wear your pajamas inside out tonight.